whom share a common experience that they had as young men that play a very large part, I would say, in being who we are today. And I was talking with my good friend Bruce Wicks just a few minutes ago, and we were relaying a story about a guy named Doug King. Doug was the manager of our track team back in the early 1970s. Doug got out of Bates College and went down to New York to make his way in life, and was applying for a job at a major bank in New York. Fresh out of Bates, put on the only suit that he owned and put his best foot forward and went down to interview for a job. Sat down at the table, and the executive interviewing him took a look at his resume and looked at Doug and said, "Congratulations, young man, you have the job." It's a true story. And Doug said, "That's it?" He says, "Well, yes, I'm looking over here at your resume, and I see that you were the manager of the Bates College cross-country and track team for the 4 years that you were there. Is that right?" He said, yes, that's right. He says, "Well, any guy who can put up with Walt Slovenski's for 4 years ought to find working at this bank a piece of cake." So they're everywhere. And I think that story sums up why we're all here tonight, that we each share that common bond of those 4 o'clock practices, 6 o'clock training meals, those excellent Friday afternoon meetings, multiple bad jokes, horrific workouts, and those long rides back to Lewiston on the bus on Saturday nights. But I don't think that any one of us who's here tonight would trade those experiences for anything. And if you'll join me and look back on all of those experiences and thank the 2 people who were responsible for it all and give them a welcome, that would be Coach Slovenski and Ruth Slovenski, who deserves an awful lot of credit for this. Now that Coach is retired and he has an awful lot of time on his hands, you're probably wondering what he's going to do for his next career. And I was thinking, this being an election year and the newspapers being covered with political rhetoric about the 2 present candidates are going to do when they get elected to the Oval Office, I'm wondering what it would be like if Coach decided to throw his hat into the ring, become the Ross Perot of 1996, run for president, and actually get elected. With imagination in hand and with an awful lot of apologies to David Letterman, I would like to give you the top 10 list of changes that America would see if Walt were elected president in 96. Number 10, our troops in Bosnia would be issued new uniforms consisting of unnaturally colored cardigan sweaters complete with little alligator emblems. Number 9, there would be new rules for federal judges. Lose the beards, get a haircut. Number 8, no more girls in the military. Number 7, Russian President Boris Yeltsin would be picked up at the airport for his next summit meeting in a broken-down Chevy van with a noisy muffler. Number 6, in order to keep the Oval Office supplied with enough coffee, Ecuador would be invaded, annexed, and named as our 51st state. Number 5, half the Secret Service agents would apply for disability, citing exhaustion, stemming from trying to keep up with the new boss. Number 4, members of the Army's 82nd Airborne Division are shocked when on his first inspection, the Commander-in-Chief says, "Here, let me show you the right way to jump out of an airplane." Number 3, that portrait of Ronald Reagan, dubbed another tax and spend liberal by the new boss, would be removed from the East Wing. Number 2, all pool tables would be removed from all military bases because we all know too much pool is bad for your legs. And the number 1 change brought about in America by Walt's successful presidential campaign would be a new rule: no spikes in the White House. I would like at this point to introduce 2 representatives from Bates College who have a presentation to make. Would you please welcome Dana Mulholland, who is the athletic director and the man who has the unenviable task of filling the shoes of Walt Slovenski, and we wish him well in cutting his own weight through his athletic career. Al Fereshetian, I knew I was going to say Al Fereshetian, please. Welcome him from Bates College.
Thank you, Bob. Excuse me. Thank you, Bob. Walt, Ruth, the rest of the Slovenski family, colleagues, guests, friends. It's my real pleasure to be here tonight as a representative of Bates College. First of all, though, I'd like to make at least one correction. I am not the athletic director. I have been the acting athletic director this past half a year, acting being the operative word. And Suzanne Coffey is away on sabbatical, and she sends her condolences. I'm really pleasantly surprised to look around the room and see the number of people that are here. 2 days ago, Walt and I were having a conversation just before his noonday dip at the pool about how many people were expected to be here. And he said that he thought that it would be a fairly good turnout. He said you can always count on those guys that laugh at your jokes to be there. And I can't believe that all of you guys laughed at each other. The main reason for my taking some of your time tonight is to make Walt a presentation. This is the initial year of the award. The Physical Education and Athletic Department has initiated a new award this year called the Professional Excellence Citation. Walt is one of 3 recipients this year, and before I make that award, I would like to introduce to you the man who has the unenviable task of taking over for the icon, Al Fereshetian.
I can't tell you how truly excited and pleased I am to be able to be here. Looking out and seeing all the faces here, and I'm getting to know some of them, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know as many of you as I possibly can. I'm not real good at that, so it takes me a little while. So if I stumble on your name a few times, believe me, in a couple of years I'll have it figured out. So bear with me with that. But I tell you, it's a privilege, truly. I can't express it any more to say that it's an absolute privilege to have the opportunity to follow in the footsteps of Coach Slovenski. And I recognize what this program has done through all the years. And more importantly, I recognize, and this reception tonight is a good indication of that, I really recognize the influence that Coach Slovenski had on so many people and so many people's lives during his tenure as track and field coach at Bates College. And I'm thankful of that, and I'm in awe of that result that he's had in so many people's lives. I also am a little concerned because I understand he retired 13 years ago, or was thinking about retiring 13 years ago, and I want to let the coach know that I really like this job, and I'm kind of hoping that this time it's for real, because I'd like to stick around and keep going. But seriously, I just really am very thankful to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to get up and visit with all of you, and I really do want to have the opportunity to meet as many of you as I possibly can. If I haven't gotten to you at this point in time, sometime tonight, I hope that we can spend some time together. For those of you, I know a burning question that's already come up a number of times is the alumni cross-country meet. Believe me, we're going to keep going with it, and we're really excited about it. I've got flyers with me on the alumni cross-country meet. And meet schedules for cross-country for any of you that might be able to, be in the area or catch us when we're in your town or something along that lines. I brought them with me so that you can have them. I'm looking forward to trying to continue the excellence that the coach has had, and quite honestly, it's probably a time of change, and we'll be moving in some different directions in some areas, but it truly is a privilege. I feel like throughout this whole season, I've got a chance to meet a lot of people, and especially the guys on the team. And the first thing I heard about Bates is you're going to love the kids. You're going to love the kids. And you guys are all part of the kids at one point in time. But that's been true. The kids at Bates are just something really special. And it's fun to go to practice every day. It's fun to go to work every day. But one thing that I kind of feel like I've missed out is on the camaraderie and the union and that y'all share. And the stories that we're going to hear. I'm sure Coach probably doesn't know this, but I've already heard a few of them, so I suspect I'll hear a couple more during the course of the evening. But you guys really have something special here, and I just can't tell you how privileged I feel to be able to, in essence, have some sort of a membership in this group, and looking forward to it building and continuing, and the Bates track and field program, cross-country program, being very strong and competitive for many years to come. Thank you.
Without being too obvious, Walt certainly has provided excellence in his position at the college and his many positions at the college over the 43, I think it was 43 years that he served. When he began in 1952 as the assistant football coach, or the freshman football coach, I guess it was in those days, all the way through until when he retired a year ago, and we are eternally grateful for all the things that he has done for the college, and obviously your presence here tonight is a testimony to all the things that he represents. Just quickly, a few of the things that Walt was able to accomplish. He held the position of cross-country coach and head track, indoor and outdoor track coach for 36 years. During that time, he compiled more than 700 victories. That obviously is an outstanding milestone achievement. More than 20 state of Maine championships, and in those days, in a lot of those days, that included the University of Maine. Excuse me. He produced 26 All-Americans, or one might argue that 26 All-Americans produced Walt as being a great coach. I'm not sure which way it was. But certainly he had the opportunity to work with 26 All-Americans, several of whom are here tonight. And one of the things that maybe some of you have forgotten over the years is that in the late 50s, I think it was from 57 to 59, Walt's team had the Bates College record for the most consecutive wins. I think it was 30 wins in a row, and this was held, as I said, I think for 30 years or something like that, until volleyball very recently overtook that mark. But volleyball was scored a little different. It's an entirely different sport, and it's not even the same kind of competition. But certainly, that is one of the highlights that I certainly wanted to recognize again tonight. The physical award that we are about to present is in two parts. One being a plaque. That is a replica of a plaque that will be permanent in Alumni Gymnasium, which says, Bates College, Department of Physical Education and Athletics, presents this professional excellence citation to Walt Slovenski for outstanding service and dedication to the college, 1952 to 1996. And along with the plaque, we also have a plot that is inscribed with the same inscription. So it's been my pleasure to be here, and congratulations, Mark.
Thank you very much, Dana. And Al, welcome to Bates College Track and Field. We're going to move on, and I'm wondering what it must have been like to have been an adversary, although probably each one of us felt like we were an adversary of Walt's at one time or another, 4 years we were there, but what it was like to be an adversary all the time. And with that perspective, I'd like to welcome Gordon Kelly. Gordon was from 1959 until very recently the head coach of track and field at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he's currently the director of physical education there. Would you welcome, please, Gordon Kelly.
Ruth, Walter,
Former track athletes and guests. It is surely a pleasure to be here again. And Bob did shed some light on that, and I was kind of trying to figure it out as to exactly what the story was. I thought maybe the last one was for practice. Or that we would have one of these every 13 years. Actually, one of the things I thought was that Walter had made a commitment to pick somebody that he would beat MIT one more time after 1983. And it didn't happen. And so this could have gone on and on and on. And I think he gave up on that one. So Al, that's a challenge for you. I have to cheat. I will be brief. I know there's a lot of people, a lot of insiders that have a lot of stories. There's a lot of Walt Slovenski stories around. And as a matter of fact, Walter did speak to all the people who were at the head table and asked us to be brief because he's very anxious to get back down to the bar and start drinking.
right?
Now, I do come from with a little different perspective as an outsider and as an adversary, so to speak. But I spent a lot of time with Walter. He's one of my closest coaching friends over the years. And the only thing is that it always seemed to cost me money, or MIT money, when I was with him. I mean, some people think Walter's cheap. You might say he was financially prudent, cost efficient, or whatever. You can make your own determinations. You know, when there was a coach's social, and the bill came around, usually Walt would be in the men's room at that time. One of my early meetings way back when with Walter, we had a coaches meeting in one of the fancier hotels in Boston, and I happened to go in the men's room with Walter, and it was one of those where the stalls were paid toilets, and he saw me go in, and he said, when you come out, he said, hold the door open so that I don't have to go underneath.
I don't know if he still does that, but he's behind doors right now.
But actually, you know, he was always concerned about saving Bates money, too. And I know because I saw some of the motels that he used to put his team in. They were the type of places where the clerk would ask, do you want the hourly rate or the daily rate? And then Walter was one of the early coaches that was into this carbo loading business. Every time he came to Boston, it was a Prince Spaghetti House. You know? I actually thought he was a shareholder or a part owner in that thing. And he'd always want to come in the office. I got to call the Prince Spaghetti House, tell him when we're going to be there. But I know that Walter did enjoy coaching track, but where Walter really made his money was on that car rental agency that he was running up there at Bates. He had that fleet of Bates, I used to call them the Batesmobiles. And I had some personal experience. Walter knows the story. We were up there for the New England Division III meet, and we had, at that time, I think we had 3 vans or something. We went out after the meet, and one of the vans wouldn't run. So we tried for a while, and I said, well, I know that Walter's got a bunch of vans. He rents them back to the school. Maybe he'll help us out. And so I called Walter at home, and I said, Walter, one of our vans is disabled, and you know, would you have an extra one that you might be able to rent us or something? And you know, I don't think he knew that I heard this. He must have put his hand over the phone, and he said, I think we got another one. So Walter came down with, I think we got the number 3. He wasn't going to give MIT anything too good. So, and he knows what's next too, because this is a true statement. I said, Walter, how much is this going to cost us? And Walter said, look, this is an emergency. You work for a multi-million-dollar institution down there in Boston. Don't be concerned with money. So after I filled it with gas, put oil in it, put air in, put windshield washing stuff in there, we got the thing going, we got down to Boston. But it doesn't end there, because we had talked about how we were going to get it back to Lewiston. So he said, well, I'll figure something out. So Sunday I get a call in the afternoon at home. He says, I've just figured out how we're going to get that van back. He says that one of my athletes is down in Milford, and he's coming back tomorrow. And if you give him $20 more, he'll bring that back to Lewiston.
He's in there. Where's Kenny Reagan?
Kenny Reagan, that's the guy. Well, it's easy to. I mean, you don't have to fabricate any Walt Slovenski stories. And the ones you're going to hear, they're all true. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I have to tell you, because I know some of the athletes are going to appreciate this one. We're in a hotel room, and Walter pushes the wrong button on the TV, and he gets the pay TV channel. Well, on comes one of these pornographic movies, and Walter said it was the first time that he had seen one. So it's on for a while. He says, "This is terrible. This is terrible." And he kept watching it. So he said, "I'm not going to pay for this. If they expect me to pay for this, I am not going to pay for it." So the next day I go down and we're checking out of the hotel, and he's into his discussion with the clerk, and he says, "That came on accidentally, and there's no way that I should pay for it." She says, "Mr. Slovenski, did you have to watch it for 45 minutes?"
And you were there.
The only only other one that I want to tell you, because again, this particular athlete is out, and I spoke to him earlier. And this was an incident. I happened to be eating with the Bates track team, and I think we were in a Denny's or whatever. And Bob Cedrone was sitting next to me. And at that time, Bob Cedrone weighed, he told me tonight, actually, 317 pounds. And you wouldn't know what he looks like. He looks like an 800 runner today. And so the waitress came, and everybody ordered, and Bob Cedrone said, "No, thank you." And so the food started to come, and this guy sitting in right next to me started to salivate, and as the hamburgers started to get delivered, and I said, "Well, you know, I thought maybe he was sick or something," and he said, "No, I don't have any money." So I said, "Well, would you like to borrow a few dollars?" He said, "Yeah." So Walter looked over at him and said, what are you giving him money for? He says, "I gave him $5 yesterday." And he said, "That's his tough luck if he spends it all in one meal." So then the next day, I got involved in a philosophical discussion with the base team, because Cedrone is trying to explain to me that there's no way that weight men ought to get the same amount of money for food as distance runners. And I'm just feeding them and saying, "Yeah, that's the way we do it at MIT. The weight guys get twice as much as the distance runners." So, as a matter of fact, Walter told me that the other side of that is here. Bob Chasen, that's the one he was trying to compare himself to. So, he was trying to tell me that these distance runners would take the money and actually had stuff left over, and they could invest it, and they're actually making money when they graduate. Well, Walter's been a friend of mine for 35 years, and I've spent a good amount of time at track competitions. We usually get together more closely at some of the larger meets where we had a smaller number of athletes, and we'd share rooms and so forth. And that was another one. He'd tell me how I could save money for MIT by instead of me staying alone, if I could cut down on that room and then pay him what it would be, what the half of his room would be. And I always wanted to ask Bob Hatchett if he ever turned that half of the money in that I gave him for the room. But I can tell you, a weekend with Walt Slovenski is a real trip. And God bless Bruce Slovenski. I think a lot of coaches and athletes here know what she had to put up with over these years. But with all his idiosyncrasies, his sense of humor, he was really a fun guy. But on a serious note, I always had great respect for Walter's track teams. 44 years in what really is a young man's profession. And he had enthusiasm right up to the end. And his teams were always highly disciplined, always had great morale, and were always very competitive. Walter is a competitive guy, as all you know, and that came through with his teams. I'll tell you one little thing about this competitiveness. Sometime way back, track coaches were asked to share results, and that kind of bothered Walter. He knew up in Maine the scores didn't get into the Boston Globe. He could get the MIT scores through the Boston Globe and the other teams, the Tufts and so forth, but it would be a little harder for us to get the Lewiston paper and so forth. So that business about sharing results was a little tough. He kind of thought that was kind of helping the enemy. So we needled him about it, and I remember I got some results in the mail one time, and it said, "Here are the results of our first meet with Vaitones. This will be the end as we're running out of paper at Vegas." Another great line that Walter, it was one of his last years that he came in MIT, and I think he was like 82 at that time. And he walked up to me, and he was limping at the time, and he said, "I don't know if I can take this for another 15 years." I think this turnout of this many athletes is indicative of what Coach Slovenski has meant to you athletes and the athletic program at Bates. I think a lot of you probably received more education from your dealings with Coach Slovenski than probably you received in the classroom at Bates. I think that those of you that got on inside of the program, and all of you here certainly did that, you wouldn't be here. It was probably for a new freshman coming in, a lot of them went, "Wow, what is this guy all about?" And maybe a few got turned off. But those that really got into it really had an education and a tremendous track experience. And that was the thing that I respected the most. You always knew that you were going to have a tough meet when you met one of Walter's track teams over the years. There was just and we had some great meets between MIT and Bates, and of course you had great meets with your rivals in Maine, Bowdoin and Fulton and so forth. I certainly wish Walter well in his retirement, and I do have a little presentation from the track coaches. Many of them, there's a few of them here tonight, and many of them would have liked to have been here and were unable, but they certainly wanted to be remembered. And they wondered what could they do. And one of the things was they said, well, why don't we give Walter a night out at the top of the hub or something? And after a few of us got together, we said, that's not Walter's style. Instead of going once to the top of the hub, he'd rather go 4 times to the Prince Spaghetti House. So Walter, on behalf of your friends in the track coaching fraternity, there's a $100 certificate for however many trips or however many people you want to take. Probably one time with the Slovenski clan will take care of it. Thank you. And the only other thing is I get to see you back here in another 13 years.
Thank you, Gordon, and you're right about getting an education. I remember as an inexperienced freshman taking my first bus trip with Coach, going over to the University of Vermont. If you remember fondly those trips of getting on Route 2 in a bus, rolling over the hills of New Hampshire, and I, not really knowing what I was doing, took the seat right up front, right across the aisle from Coach. You remember, this was 1972, and the Cold War was still going on, and there I was, a captive audience, as Coach gave me this diatribe about everything is about us and the evil empire over there up there on the frozen tundra with their totalitarian society and their pampered professional athletes who are mocking amateurism with their living in their lavish surroundings. We went and ran the meet, and it wasn't until I was riding home that I found out he was talking about the University of Maine. On that note, I would like to welcome a UMaine graduate, class of 1961. Joe Woodhead has been Coach's assistant since 1985 and has had remarkable success in coaching the weight events. 3 of his athletes have achieved All-American status, and they did that not once apiece, but a total of 11 times. He's coached 13 individuals who have been national qualifiers. in the weight events. Would you welcome, please, Joe Woodhead.
Bob, I gotta figure out which glasses I need here. Waller, Ruth, Slovenski clan. You know, after being with Walt for 10 years, it's really tough to know where to begin. I'm talking about a living legend here. Now, he's without a doubt, as Bob mentioned earlier, probably the most successful coach, without a doubt, the most successful coach Bates College has ever had. Every Bates indoor and outdoor track record has been broken while he was coaching. Record holders such as Rudy Smith, John Douglas, Al Harvie, Bob Cedrone, Steve Ryan, Wayne Pennington, Mark Miller, just to mention a few, you're still on the board. Also reminds me every now and then, they're my kids. Over the years, I've found Walt to be a great family man, high moral values, very honest, and also a great sense of humor. I can remember checking out of the Howard Johnson Motel in Newton back a few years ago. We had New England at MIT, and one of the athletes left something behind. And Walter, while he was checking out, would ask the young lady who spoke with a broken English accent if she would, if they found this particular item, to return it to Bates College, through the athletic department, Lewiston, Maine. And she says, "Do you have zip?" Walter says, "You bet your life, I got plenty of it." 44 years ago, Walter came to Bates. I was a junior at Lewiston High School. He coached freshman football, as Bob mentioned. Coached that for a couple of years, I guess, Walt. And last fall, Brian Flynn and Jim Kirsch got together and they started reminiscing a little bit, and I happened to be in the Merrill supply room where Brian now is supply clerk up there. And he told a pretty funny story about Walter when he was coaching football at a game at Eden Academy. And I guess Bates that particular day was really riddled with penalties. One of the penalties just happened to be right in front of the bench. 15 yards for defensive holding. Defensive holding? You don't ref for an official, you stink. Ref threw the flag down, marched off another 15 yards and says, "I always smell from here, coach." Walt loves people. He tries to get to know as many as he can. When he was hired at Bates, he made it a point to meet as many people as he possibly could. Professors, other coaches, grounds people, janitors. And while he was making the rounds, he came across 3 people out on the football field where the school board is and where there was a flagpole. And they're all looking out, and he came over and he says, "Hi, fellas, I'm the new track football coach here at Bates College. I was just hired. My name's Walt Slovenski. What are you guys doing?" He said, "Well, we're trying to figure out how high this flagpole is." So Walter, being a nice guy and likes to be helpful, ran over to his car, grabbed a wrench, grabbed a tape measure, came over. I did one of the bolts of the flagpole, lowered it down, took out his tape measure, measured, and says, "There you go, it's 30 feet. Put the flagpole back up, walked off. One of the maintenance guys says, "It shows you how much those damn coaches know. We're asking for the height and you just the length. As I mentioned before, you got a great sense of humor. When I first came to work with him back in 1985, one of the things I want you to know is be able to pronounce my name. And I want you to be able to spell it. And he says, do you know why my name ends in S-K-I? I said, no. He said, because I can never spell toboggan. Walt made it to the point before I get up here tonight. Now, he knows me, he could tell me this, and I'm sure he could have told Walter Gordon the same thing. He says, you know, Joe, a good academic speaker is one who can speak for posterity without encroaching upon eternity. Now, I'm not going to be that much fun. Now, speaking of driving stories, you know, Walter always drove in the speed lane. And coming down out of Maine, out of New Hampshire, coming down 495, you know, there's 4 lanes. And I said, Walter, why do you always travel in the speed lane? He said, well, it's much smoother for one thing. But I said, Walter, we got to take a turn at about a quarter of a mile from here. There's 4 lanes of cars. He said, don't worry about it. I said, I'll make it. And sure enough, he made it. He made it, but I was in the jump seat. Now, he would always say when he comes across one of those RV campers, he says, you know, I can't understand. He says, a camper is a guy who pays a stiff fee for the same sort of uncomfortable accommodations he griped about when he's in the Army. Speaking of the military, you know, Walt served in the Pacific with the Seabees during World War II. And after the war, he was stationed for a while in California. And he was telling me about a friend of his who collided with a truck carrying a horse while on leave. A few months later, he tried to collect damages for injuries. How can you now claim to have all these injuries, asked the insurance company's lawyer? According to the police report at the time, you said you weren't hurt, said Walter's friend. Well, look, replied Walter's friend. I was lying on the road in a lot of pain, and I heard someone say the horse had a broken leg. The sheriff pulled out his pistol and shot the horse. He turned to me and says, are you okay? Well, I'm going to wrap this up, Walter, with some of your philosophical views that I've known you to have over the years. You always believe that sports don't build character, they reveal it. You believe that all men like to think they can do it alone, but a real man knows there's no substitute for support and encouragement. You believe that one measure of leadership is the caliber of people who choose to follow you. You believe that success is never final, but failure can be. You believe that the hardest, the toughest part of the body, the tenderness is in the hands. You believe that being defeated is often a temporary condition. Giving up is what makes it permanent. You believe that success is always temporary. When all is said and done, the only thing you have left is your character. You believe that one finds himself in a slump. It's a good time to examine the quality of preparedness. You believe that the ability, or rather ability, is what you're capable of doing. Motivation determines what you do. an attitude determines how well you do it. And finally, Walter, a great gift of life is to be intimately acquainted with people you might never even introduce yourself to had life not done it for you. Congratulations, and just a pleasure to be with you for the past 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Our next guest is actually the guy who is primarily responsible for us all being here tonight, who has done all of the work and has yet to receive his due recognition. I would like for you now to welcome Steve Ryan, class of 1983. Not only Steve, is Steve an excellent organizer of testimonial dinners, but he's also a heck of a javelin thrower. He is the current Bates College record holder in the javelin, something around 230 feet. Welcome, Steve, and thank you for doing such a great job.
Some of you may have noticed that the beef you selected for your dinner tonight tastes remarkably like a chicken. So I'd like to thank those of you for generously volunteering to raise your contribution toward the gift we put together for Walt. As a matter of fact, when Coach found out that the difference between the money we take in tonight and the cost of the dinner would go toward the gift, he suggested we have Bates cook up a couple of hundred shepherd's pies and bring them down to the event. As a matter of fact, Coach even offered to put them in the back of his van and prepare that himself. Let the record show I'm not the first one to bring up Walt's thriftiness. But I can remember a couple of stories. One was out at a track meet with a few of the guys in Chicago one year, and one morning I was the only one that had a morning event. So Coach and I needed to get out to the track, which is about 5 miles from the hotel. And Coach decided it wasn't appropriate for us to rent a car. He decided it wasn't appropriate for us to take a taxi. He decided it wasn't appropriate for us to take a bus. True story, we're out on the side of the road, and he says, Chuck, you're going to need to hitchhike for us. Now, I'm a javelin thrower, and I've got 3 javelins and javelin cases that are 9 feet long. And, I'm feeling a little bit self-conscious and sheepish. And I kind of stand there with my thumb out like this, and a couple of cars go by at about 60 miles an hour, and I'm feeling like an idiot. As Coach says, no, Chuck, it's like this, see? It's like this, see? He comes up and he pushes me out of the way. And honest to God, he goes like this. He takes his thumb up over his head, and he starts running along the traffic like this. And he runs about 20 feet down the road and veers about 3 feet into the lane, and this car had to swerve to avoid hitting him. The next car that comes along, he does the same thing, goes running with his thumb over his head. Never saw anybody hitchhike like this. And he goes about 5 feet into the lane. The guy just missed him. And by the time he got to the third driver, I swear I thought we were both going to be killed. And just then, God bless him, Carl Geiger pulls out of the hotel parking lot in a rented Lincoln Town car and says, you guys need a ride to the meet. Thank you, Carl. I wish he was here. Another story I remember was my junior year, right before breaking for Christmas break. It was the first year, I think, that we opened up the AFBB, the new track building. And I was a physics major, and Coach comes up to me with a big pile of blueprints of the track, the whole building. And he said, Chuck, take these home for the break, see, and I want you to go through these things and figure out the starting points for the 800 and all the running events for each of the different lanes and mark them, and we're going to spray paint them all when you come back. And again, I'm feeling a little self-conscious. I say, gee, Coach, I don't know. Don't you think you ought to hire a professional or something? I mean, it's just geometry, but really, I don't know. So I said, no, Chuck, just, concentrate, just do it right, just do it. So I go home and I spent hours and hours working on this thing and double-checked and triple-checked my work and just didn't really feel too good about it. But I came back and we spent a day going around and spray painting the starting lines for all the different events and all the different lanes. And turns out that I was measuring the distances from the inside line of each lane, and you're supposed to measure from 6 inches in. And I've never told you this, but well, it's good time with Eddie. Peter and I have been going through the archives, and turns out that among the bogus record set in the field house are 22 school records, 15 Maine state records, 7 New England Division III records, and 2 New England Open records. I'm sorry, Coach. Next time hire a professional. A few laughs tonight at Coach's expense, but we all know that there's another side to Coach, and it's a side I got to see in a real special way. In the fall of 1994, with the last alumni meet I got to get up to. Missed it last year, but I didn't run. I watched the meet, and after it was over, when everybody else was warming down, Coach asked me if I'd hop in the golf cart and go around and pull up stakes. And I said, great, sounds good. So we're driving around for 5 miles, having a great time. You got to imagine this gorgeous fall day and over Labor Day weekend, beautiful Maine fall day. And we're having a lot of laughs, and Coach is telling some funny stories and just reminiscing a lot, talking about some of the great guys and great teams that he had and some of the great people he had worked with. And got a little sentimental, and he got a little choked up for a bit. And at one point he turns to me after a long pause and says, Chuck, 1994, what a bunch of people I've been able to work with. What class were you with? What were some of the guys you were with? When did you start here? And I said, Coach, I started here in 1979. All of 1979. He said, Chuck, I should have quit this job 15 years ago. But we are giving Walt a gift, and we're still working on it because it's pretty expensive. And actually, if anybody wants to contribute after the dinner or sometime in the future to it, feel free. But what we want to do is, a lot of people here have competed in the cage. The cage is no longer a cage. There's no glass ceiling, no upper deck, no dirt floor, no window to Coach's office. It's got an artificial surface, and it's used for things like lacrosse practice. So what we want to do is have people in the future know what exactly took place in this track. So we're putting together a plaque, and it's going to cover up the area where Walt's window was, and the heading on the plaque is going to read, "This building was the home of Bates Men's Track and Field from 1920 through 1980. The most outstanding college athletes in New England competed here on the square 176-yard bank track. The crowds of up to 600 people watched track meets from a balcony that ringed the arena. C. Ray Thompson coached from 1920 to 1952. Walter Slovenski coached 1952 to 1974. That's the cage records, indoor records, and outdoor records. And so this isn't done yet, but that's what it's going to say, and can't wait to see it up there. It's going to look great, and thank you.
Thank you very much. You talking about your transportation story, I'm sure everybody's got one. I can remember in 1973 having to go to Princeton, New Jersey to compete in the IC4As. We pile into a van. There's several hundred miles to drive. It just happens to be in one of the biggest petroleum crunches that happened in the Western Hemisphere since World War II. We were We were into rationing gasoline, and you had to have the right license plate in order to get in line and buy gasoline. But Coach said, even though we were leaving Lewiston on the wrong day of the week, according to his license plate, that this is America, and they're not going to stop us from getting to New Jersey. So we're loading the equipment into the van, and he's got all these huge gas cans that he's loading into the van. And so he sweet talked some guy in a service station in Lewiston to give us some gas, and away we go to New Jersey, and we're all in the back of the van, and we're gagging from the fumes. And he said, "Oh no, this is America, and they're not going to stop us from getting to this traffic." And so we end up pulling over on the side of the road, somewhere in Connecticut and somewhere in New Jersey, and Coach has got us stashing gas in the woods on the way home because we weren't going to be coming home on the right day to buy gasoline. And I remember Gary Richardson jumping across 4 lanes of highway to get the can of gas and load into the van in order for us to make it back to Lewiston. No wonder the guy was such a successful track coach, because he could, do wonders with his resourcefulness, and that's a trip I will never forget. Gary Richardson running across with the gasoline. I would like now to welcome Al Harvie, Bates College class of 1965. Al was a tremendous hurdler while he was at Bates for 4 years in a row. He was the high hurdle champion at the state meet. He still holds the high hurdle records. Just recently, Al was elected into the Auburn-Lewiston Athletic Hall of Fame. He's been Walt's assistant coach at track and field. Would you welcome Al Harvie, please?
Thanks, it's great to be here. Steve, you didn't tell us why they canceled the state, but I think Walt heard something about this mad cow disease and put the kibosh. Dr. Ed O'Neill, you've been working on that around the world? Yeah, we're working on it. That's great. As I came in tonight, I couldn't help but notice the centerpiece pieces on the table, the relay batons. When I worked for Walt, we couldn't find one relay baton. Where you found so many. When I was at Bates, Brooks Quimby and Lavinia Schaefer told me that the first thing in public speaking is to know your audience. And I can't think of an audience that I've addressed in the past that I think I know better, and it's so exciting to have the memories of the performances of most of you, and those that went before me, of course, I didn't have the opportunity to see, but I have heard so much about. Try to encapsulate Walt tonight is an awesome task. When you're on a roast like this, it's supposed to be, you never know what somebody's going to say before you. I thought I might talk about Ruth for a while. Asked Walt one time, I said, "Do you ever tell your wife that you love her?" He said, "No, but I'd tell her if I didn't." That's true. I could tell you about the time Walt went to the local lumber yard, told the man he wanted to buy some 2x4s. The guy says, "Well, how long would you like them?" Walt said, "Quite a while, I'm going to build a house for them." I could tell many stories tonight, but I thought that I might take a little bit different tack, particularly seeing the celebration of all of you people here tonight. So I've written something special, and Walt, can you hear okay? This is just called an ode to Walt. Uncle Milty, you must plead guilty for almost everyone here tonight, for he took his keys and opened Bates' doors, not with grades or college board scores, for it was times and jumps and throws and speed. not so much how well we could read. And Walt always got to pick 5 or 10 for 40-plus years, again and again. Bates legends are here and headlining this mob are Walt and Milt and Flinny and Bob. But tonight is Walt's night, and oh, mamma mia, we wanted to surprise him, but this was his idea. A roast, I was told, where he knows we're just kidding. It is not quite the same without Ruth upstairs knitting. You remember that? What can we say about Walt's long career that he hasn't kept telling us year after year? There are titles and records, team pictures and frames. But in his golden years, will he remember our names? Like his opposing coaches, Sterner and Sweet, Levine and Kelly he most liked to beat, Sebastiansky and Westcott, and so many others, especially those 2 young Slovenski brothers. From the 50s to the 90s, the names are all here. We've come to give Walt another cheer. Not just the champions Walt worshipped like gods, but also the rookies that filled up his squads. Like a Bates who's who, we welcome each of you back. Grab the javelins, boys, we're under attack.
I remember that.
You do. Remember Smith and Douglas and Booner, of course, Vanner and Fresina and C.D. Torse. There's Schuyler the Miler and Goodrich the Bear, Tyler the Half-Miler and Jenkins the Mayor. There's Ian and Scotty and Belcher and Miner, and LaValle and Pete, a couple old-timers. There's Shelley and Randall, and Edzo and Zane, and who could forget Slim, Slick, Dirt, and Stain.
That is explain that.
Well, you're going to get up here, lady. You can explain. There's Guru and Lefty and Flooch and Chipper, Rufus and Rooney and Slut and Groovy and Dipper, the Ragman and Lenzo, Cedrone and Brownie, Rufus and Rooney and Sluggo the Townie, Sully and Mully and JC and JD, Peters and Ryan, Tut and JP, to O'Brien and Hibbert, and certainly others. Get ready, get set, now on your marks, brothers. Remember that one too. You weren't there at the time. Marty and Bibbo, Dippo and Krell, Thompson, Quintal, Ruby and Wells. There's Dixon and Doyle, O'Donnell and Rose. Gallant and Gromelski kept Walt on his toes. Juliet, Guberlet, Oric and Goldie. Williams and McGrath, another real oldie. And Peterson and Weatherby. Just turn them loose. They'd always beat the others down to the goose. The Hammonds, the Harvies, Bowditch and Kramer, and a guy named Slivers, the real Hall of Famer. To those of you not mentioned, it's not because of time. It's because I couldn't get Soderstrom and Zidilowski to rhyme. Walt, you coach fathers and sons, brothers and cousins. With your final command, beat those Russians. Thank you.
I did a little bit of research, got some records from Walt's days at Syracuse University, where he was an outstanding athlete both on the baseball field and on the football field. I was interested in his work in the classroom as an undergraduate. I did I couldn't come up with much. They couldn't come up with much. I did come up with they did have a record of one independent study that Walt did in his human physiology class that was entitled "The Negative Effects of Excessive Belly Laughing on the College Distance Runner." He followed that up a year later when he wrote his senior thesis, for which he won highest honors, entitled "Facial Hair and Its Effect on the Ruination of College Hurdlers." The one athletic item they gave me from the archives was just a football clipping, and it was kind of frayed. I didn't get to read too much of it, but I could read the headline. It said, "Orangemen win, but Slovenski injures head. X-rays reveal nothing."
I'm off the team.
I'd like for you to welcome Joe Deaver, please, from the class of 1989. Joe was a national qualifier in the weight throw with a 56-foot throw. He's somewhere around 160 feet throwing the hammer, and I believe that Joe holds the record for longest distance traveled to get to this dinner. Would you welcome Joe Deaver, please?
Thank you, Bob. As most of you know, but it kind of fits in because it's what Walter used to call me, is Joe Deavers. He actually pronounced my name Joe Dever. I think that's Walt's fault for all those times. But thanks for inviting me here. Just so you know, I did have to travel quite a distance to get here. I lived in the next town over, Wakefield. When I first got the message, I was upset about two things. One, I had to send my money to Steve Ryan, and two, I had to travel so far to get here. But putting that aside, it's going to be a tough act to follow, I think, all the speakers that have gone before me. So I'm going to keep Coach's advice in mind. I'm going to try and take it out fast, pick it up in the middle, and finish up strong. I was not here 13 years ago when Coach, I think, had his first retirement party. At that time, I was trying to think about where I wanted to go to college myself. And one of the places I was looking at was Bates College, where I heard that Coach Slovenski was retiring. I thought, there'd be a new young coach to take us along and bring us to new levels. Little did I know that for the next 4 years, I was going to be coached by my teacher, my coach, and my mentor, Walt Slovenski. And I did learn an awful lot of things while I was at Bates and while I was on the track team. And maybe I can reflect on some of those things and maybe share with you maybe not just one travel trip, but maybe a conglomeration of many trips that I took with Walt to all different places over New England. The trips would usually start out, I don't seem to know why, with me ending up in the front seat next to Coach. I don't know if it was because I was the last guy out of the locker room or what, or Coach just enjoyed my company up front. But I did spend many times with Walt up front. And on those trips, I learned a lot of things. I learned how to make a left-hand turn at a red light, which he always assured me was legal in Poland. And I also learned how to cut across 3 lanes of traffic to make an exit that we've already passed. And if we didn't make the last exit, I also learned how to back up on a Route 2 on-ramp, avoiding trucks barreling down the off-ramp actually. Some of the other things I learned on those trips, I learned the location of, I think, every single Dairy Joy in New England, where we were always sure to stop. And I learned about Prince's Spaghetti Restaurant, and what a wonderful place that can be. One of the things I think Coach learned from me was that one time we were at we were going to Prince's, and he looked in the back of the van and he said, Anyone here want to split the spaghetti dinner for two? And being, you know, a white guy and, you know, anxious to get on Coach's good side, I said, sure, Coach, I'll do it. And I think he was a little bit perturbed when he realized that I was going to eat most of the spaghetti dinner for two, and that was the last time he asked me to share a meal. Oftentimes, I also learned, as I think it was mentioned earlier, about different places to stay in New England. I learned about the Thunderbird Motel in Fitchburg. Really a classy joint. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember that as well. I think there were a few Red Roof Inns in Vermont, maybe, or in New Hampshire. Always interesting places. And I also learned all the words to the Syracuse fight song, which we would often sing, I think, on the way. One of the things I learned not to do on all of these trips was to take up any of Coach's challenges. One challenge in particular I remember him making when we were just starting out. I think we were on the way to the Thunderbird Motel, perhaps, was Coach saying to me, you know, Joe, over next to him in the front seat, Joe, I bet you I can talk about any subject from here until we get to the motel nonstop. I said to myself, you know, I bet you can, Coach. But I didn't want to say that out loud, so I said, oh, okay, Coach. I said, well, give me a topic, he said. And I'm trying to quickly think of a topic that I know there's no way he could ever talk for the whole trip. You know, it had to be a 2.5-hour trip, I think, maybe 3 hours with a couple of stops to Dairy Joy in between. And finally, before I could get into the office, he said, how about hot dogs? I'll talk about hot dogs for the next 2.5 hours. Sure enough, you know, there's steamed hot dogs, grilled hot dogs, boiled hot dogs, hot dog mustard, hot dogs with onions, without onions. And he told me the story when he was at Syracuse University, an All-American center fielder. That not only was he an All-American center fielder at Syracuse, he was also their all-time leading hot dog salesman. That Coach and his family had a hot dog stand that they would run, a hot dog concession that they'd run outside of the stadium, and that in between innings, Coach Slovenski would run out and work the grill until someone came by and said, hey, Slivers, you're up. But those are many of the things I learned in competing for Walt, and some of the things that I'll never forget. I also, some of you know also that I just got back from Germany today. I was there on business, and while I was there, I figured I was in East Germany, the former East Germany. I thought, you know, I'm pretty darn close to Poland. You know, I think maybe I'll go and see if I can find some of the Slovenski family roots. So I set out and I kept driving, and I made it to the Polish border, and I made it. You know, what was your family's hometown in Poland, Coach? Do you remember? That's it. That's where I was. And when I was there, I met the mayor of the town, and I said, you know, Slovenski, Walter Slovenski. And the mayor said, Slivers. I said, yes, that's him. And, you know, he wanted to know how he was doing and how his family was. And he was very excited to hear that one of the town's own, one of the town's favorite sons was being honored tonight. And he wanted to send a gift. And he had you know, showed me some of the possible gifts he was going to bring, maybe a clock. It was with crystals and diamonds. And I said, no, that's not really, I think, what Coach would want. I said, he'd want something, you know, something that's a bargain, something that's a deal. And the mayor said, well, how about this? We just got 100 pounds of fresh British beef. And we'll give it to you for nothing. I said, that's it. So, Coach, out in the back of my car, I have a freezer full of beef fresh from Great Britain, and it's yours. I also, just a quick note too, when I was in Hanover. I think I left the paper over next to John Douglas. Just to let you all know, this is less to do about Walt and more to do with the reach of Bates College across the world. When I was in Frankfurt, I picked up the USA Today International, and I was looking through it very, just glancing through it when I noticed here on page 2, I believe, in the faces in the crowd, or the man on the street section, there was a question about curfews for teens, and who was one of the respondents that I see while I'm in the train station in Frankfurt, but Coach Hatch. It says, retired coach, Lewiston, Maine, and who, just so you all know, believes in the curfew. And I'm sure that Coach Slovenski would agree as well. And lastly, there was as you all probably know, there was always a little bit of tension, I think, between throwers and runners, and I think oftentimes it was a healthy tension, and it's a tension that I enjoyed, and I know, I hope at least, a lot of my friends that were runners enjoyed it as well, as I was giving them the business. But one of the highest compliments that I could give a runner was that he ran like a thrower. That's what I would say. He left it all on the track. And I'd say that about guys like John Fitzgerald and Ted Dixon and others. And I think the most I can say about Coach is that he coached like a thrower. And he left it all on the track. He left it all with his kids. And I'm for one, feel very lucky that I was able to have a part in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. I would like to invite our next guest, Steve Vaitones, who has a career that has wound through track and field, beginning with his days at Bates College, and just recently, Steve became the president of New England Track and Field. And if any of you are coaches out there and you need help getting your athletes seated in some meet anywhere in the country, Steve is the guy that you can talk to. Would you welcome Steve Vaitones, please?
Thanks, Bob. I wrote a few words here that I was going to say, but every time another speaker came up, it reminded me of something, so I scratched it out and wrote a little note, and now I've got a mess of paper here, and I can't remember anything. So many good stories. I only spent a year at Bates before doing probably one of the two worst things you could do. That's transferring to Maine. The other one would have been transferring to Bowdoin, depending on who the toughest competition was at the Maine State meet. So after a year at Bates and spending 4 years at Maine, I was still very close to the Bates program and the sphere of influence that Coach Slovenski had on the sport in the state of Maine. After I transferred, and we had a meet the next year down at Bates, exchanged some pleasantries with a few former teammates, and then I just wanted to know how people were doing, so I asked, what's Bob Littlefield going to run today? And the person suddenly turned and said, none of your damn business, and walked away. So there was, regardless if it was friendly or not, that team point total or any sort of giving away of team secrets on who might be running what carried through. I don't think we beat Bates that day. It wouldn't have mattered whether we knew what Bob was running anyway. Another cross-country event, one of the team managers at the time, a couple of years later, came over and wanted to know what the shirt I had on underneath my polo shirt was. And it was Dartmouth Relays t-shirt with a pink shirt with a red ring on the collar. And they said, well, I can sort of sense that Coach thought you might have left with that shirt that usually goes on the pin. You know, it's not a workout shirt. So the coach is always making sure that that equipment budget wasn't going to be broken by a shirt walking away to the opponents. As a freshman at Bates, I ran cross country, and I usually brought up the rear of the pack on the long workouts in the cemetery intervals. And when we moved indoors, Coach encouraged me to work as with the team managers, and I was third string team manager. Which, considering the program at Bates, the team manager is very important. I mean, I was behind Joe Gromelsky and Eric Bauer, and the team managers both got a lot of responsibility, and through the years have always contributed to the overall team success. And because of that, steering me to working with as a team manager, that's where I really found out a lot about the background, the administration of the sport, and developed an appreciation for that. And got to see the sport up close and personal, those real touching moments in things like the state meet, seeding meetings, where you'd have these, or shall we say, spirited discussions among the coaches, Slovenski, Sterna, Sebastiansky, and Schulten. Those were spirited. No point went by any of those without discussion. But because of that, it really kept my interest up in the administration of the sport, and several years later, 6 years ago, after working as a volunteer in a lot of aspects of the sport, I was able to apply for and become full-time working for USA Track and Field. I think it's because Coach gave me the opportunity to work as team manager, even though I wasn't the best athlete on the team. The other thing he did was encourage the competitive end. As a team manager, there was a posting for the Black Bear Relays on the bulletin board, and I jokingly told him that hey, there was finally an event I could do, it was a race walk. And rather than coming back with a joke, he said, well, I know somebody who can show you how to do it. And he contacted a local junior Olympic champion and gave me a few lessons, and I finished midway up in that race, which looking back on it, the performance wasn't good. But it also whetted my appetite for that event, and I went on some reasonable successes and a lot of fun with that event. So that coach was always supportive of all aspects of the sport, good, bad, and all athletes, regardless of their ability, were part of the team, and if they had the interest and enthusiasm that he had for the sport, they were welcome on the team. So I'd like to present on behalf of USA Track and Field New England a plaque to Coach Slovenski in appreciation for promoting the sports of cross country and track and field in New England for nearly half a century.
When I gave advice to coaches of speak to Steve, if you need any help with your athletes, I was wondering if there were any track coaches in the audience. I have personally had the pleasure of coaching the sport of track and field for over 20 years. First at the high school level for 18 years, lately at Bryant College. And even today, I catch myself sounding an awful lot like Walt did 25 years ago. If I've got someone who comes to me and asking advice for how to run the quarter mile, I just can't resist. If I tell them, just keep taking lefts and get back here as soon as you can. When there's a group of sprinters on the track, you know, and they finish running a bunch of a series of 200-meter runs, and they're all hunched over, hands on knees, catching their breath. I just can't resist but say, "What's the matter? Did somebody lose a contact lens?" And then one of my all-time favorite Waltisms that I've used many times: a shot putter will let a throw go, and about the only advice that I can give them is, I figured out your problem is just landing a little too close to your feet. Someone who I'm sure has that experience of sounding an awful lot like Walt and hearing that voice constantly in the back of his mind is son Pete. Pete, Dartmouth College class of 1979, who was an outstanding competitor there in the pole vault and also in the decathlon, is now head track and field coach at Bowdoin College. He is the second member of the family to join the coaching ranks. Son Paul is an assistant coach at MIT. I did hear somebody mention the Slovenskis as the Kennedys of New England track and field. Many of you probably your best recollection of Pete, for many of you who are in the audience, as not a gym rat but a cage rat. Pete grew up in the cage and catching pole vaulting poles and carrying starting blocks, and the tide has now turned, as I'm sure Pete, your son, is now the one catching the poles and hauling those starting blocks. Would you welcome, please, Pete Slovenski.
I was lucky to be around most of my dad's 44-year career at Bates. I started out with track team babysitters such as DeWitt Randall and Bill LaValle, and now ending up as the Bowdoin College coach at the end of my dad's career. My dad compiled many well-known records, but I'd like to share with you some of his lesser-known records tonight. In 44 years, he had 850 wins, 370 losses, for a winning percentage of 72%. In 1,000 restaurant meals on the road for Bates, we spent $10,000 and left tips worth $324. For a tipping percentage of 3%. In 44 years, he had 900 men on his team, and he kicked 139 men off his team, for an average of 3.1 men kicked off per year. He drove 400,000 miles for school trips. 780 of those miles were at night without lights. 350 miles without brakes. And about 240 miles without gas. In 44 years, he wore 37 different Izod sweaters, 4 of which were of colors found in nature. His average driving speed was about 74 miles an hour when the van was quiet, and during an argument it rose to 83 miles per hour. What kind of things did we have to do as the son of a Bates track coach? Gordon Kelly and Ed Sterna, opposing coaches, will tell you that they didn't like to run against Bates in the old cage. The crowd was intimidating. Bates fans would even spit on the other runners. Actually, that was us spitting. My father paid us to spit on them. He'd give us 10 cents to spit on most runners, but he'd give us 25 cents to spit on Ed Sterna. He'd give us 50 cents to spit on Gordon Kelly. But he still owes us the money. And it was interesting to grow up as the son of someone in the business of motivating people. One of his standard greetings in the morning was to call upstairs and wake us up yelling, "Come on, get up, go out and make something of yourselves." Team stopped at Prince Spaghetti for all-you-could-eat pizza and spaghetti one time, and my father told my brother, "Hey, eat a lot, it's all you can eat, so eat a lot." So Paul ate a lot. And then on the van ride home, Paul felt sick. And then he felt really sick. And he lied down on the top of the bags in the back, and he threw up all over 3 bags. And at the end of the trip, we pulled out the bags, and all 3 of them were Oparowskis. And my dad could be a little disorganized sometimes. One day in the winter, he sent me to pick up a prospective student at the jetport. It was a heavy snowstorm, and they were advising everyone to stay off the road. But my dad found out the flights were still landing, so he sent me to Portland. Very slippery driving. I met the plane, and no one came off the plane who looked like a prospective student. No one was looking for a ride to Bates. Everyone was gone. So I called my father up. I said, Dad, are you sure he's coming into the airport and not the bus station? My dad said, let me see. And he was shuffling around in his office, and he came back and said, oh, Pete, I'm sorry, he's coming next Thursday. And he could be late sometimes. He could be a little late. Once or twice a year, he'd be in such a rush leaving for a track meet that he'd forget to pick up the team sandwiches at the Commons. He'd be driving out of town so fast. Well, he'd go down the turnpike a ways, and he'd remember, and he'd call us at home, and he'd say, go over to the Commons and pick up the team sandwiches and throw them in the freezer. We had to eat track team turkey sandwiches all week. We'd have them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. By Wednesday, I'd be sick of these sandwiches, and my father would come home from work, and he'd take a sandwich out of the refrigerator and say, aren't these baked sandwiches great? He thought any food that was free was delicious. And I'd also like to thank the best group of friends and role models and heroes that anybody could have, and that's all you guys in this room. My friends at school would look up to such groups as John, Paul, George, and Ringo of the Beatles, and I remember growing up looking up to Boone, Ford, Peak, and Revizio, and other Bates teams and other groups like that. And I'll never forget the day Eddie Hibbert went up to Colby and won the state meet pole vault, 100 and 220 and 2 relays, and I wanted to grow up and be just like Eddie Hibbert, but with shorter hair. And sometimes I was so close to the team around the gym that I got in the way a little bit. I remember one time a sprinter named Bob Coleman was doing lane lifts, and I was hanging around the dash start waiting for someone to run with. I was about 12 years old. And Bob didn't notice me, and he was talking to another guy about his workout, and he said real loud, he said, God damn, Walt. And then he looked over and he shrugged his shoulders and said, oh, sorry, Pete. Just kind of one of those things where I had always had such, the guys had been so respectful of my dad around me, and that was the first taste I got of how they might talk when they didn't think he was hearing them. One night before a state meet in the old cage, I was sitting on the pole vault pit, and Frank Sebastiansky, the Bowden coach, came up to me. I was in high school, and Frank asked me to consider Bowden. After he left, John Emerson came running over and said, what did he want? What did he say? I told him Frank asked me to consider going to college at Bowden. Ha, said Emerson. If you go to Bowden, your father would kick you off the family. And I'd also like to wish good luck to Al Fereshetian. Al's been at Bates since September, and ever since then he's been like a father figure to me. When I applied for the Bowden track job 10 years ago, one of the interviewers on the committee was a Bowden track official who admired the way Bates teams came at Bowden every year with depth and doubling and tripling and desire and team spirit. And his question to me was, can you give Bowden the same kind of track program that Bates has? And every day when I go into work, that's what I try to do. I try to give Bowden the same kind of track program I knew at Bates. I'd like to close with a retelling of the poem If that came out in one of the attachments in there. And this is If, dedicated to my father. If you can lose your head when all about you are keeping bears and blame it on them. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you and convince them that you know the way. If you can wait for John Jenkins and not be tired of waiting or being lost nor ask directions. If you can meet with MIT and Brandeis and treat those two imposters just the same. If you can bear to have the vans you fought driven by drivers much safer than you. If you can watch the gas gauge sink to empty on a deserted road and send a sprinter with a 5-gallon can. If you can see your family barely clothed and fed and spend your money buying apartment houses instead. If you can force your runners and jumpers to serve long after they're completely exhausted, if you can hold on to them through short-term or JYA, if neither foes nor women's athletics can hurt you, if you can keep your politics to the right of Attila the Hun, if you can get others to fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the track and the field that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a coach, my son.
Thank you very much, Pete. Our next speaker tonight has been a special treat for me to get to meet John Douglas. For the 4 years that I spent at Bates College running track, and I'm sure for many of you that came after, everything was, well, John Douglas this, and Rudy Smith this, and John Douglas, and when John, I remember when John Douglas went down there, he won the IC4A, and what I was actually kind of sorry to see that the event tonight was being held in this building and not over in the health club, because I thought that it might be nice to adjourn to the pool to see if actually John Douglas and Rudy Smith could walk across the pool. John's from the class of 1960. His accomplishments at the college are long and impressive. I think that probably his most impressive accomplishment was that he was the national long jump champion while he was at Bates College. That's just not just college or college and university. That is the entire United States at a distance of, I believe, around 25 feet 2 inches. He comes to us tonight all the way from California. Would you please welcome John Douglas.
If I am elected, I promise.
Run, John, run.
It was interesting. Walt told me a little secret. He's a teacher, and he told me he gave a couple of envelopes to the new track coach, and I'm going to let you in on a secret. He told me what's in the envelopes. He said the first envelope is for the track coach midway through the season, and basically it says, if you're not doing so well, hey, you can always turn it around, and so forth and so on. But the second envelope, he also told me what's in it, and that's at the end of the season if you don't do well and it's really down. The second envelope says you better get 2 more envelopes for your next track coach. Walt was always a winner, and I guess one of the things I really liked about Walt, he treated us like family. And in a sense, he had the biggest family on campus, and that's the track people. I can remember one time going to Walt's house, and that's always a trip in itself. And Walt liked to talk with his hands. I mean, he was, talked a lot, and so he was showing me the house, and he was saying, planning on putting, mirrors all around it, because I like things, I want them to look bigger. I want the house to look bigger. So, I asked him, I said, well, why the mirrors on the ceiling? And he couldn't answer that one. I remember some of the trips that we took. This is part of the family outing, so to speak. Especially when we went down to Boston. We typically would stop at a 5-star restaurant called Valley Steakhouse. Now this is before they learned that steak is probably the worst thing you could possibly have, but we used to get there, and I remember seeing Walt always talking to the waitress. I didn't think he was flirting with the waitress, so and I asked Dave Boone, what's going on? And Dave said, no, he's just negotiating for bigger stakes. The ultimate negotiator. But I'll tell you though, Walt, no matter what Walt would say, Walt always said I was a quiet person. And I really wasn't quiet. It's just that Walt talked a lot. He wouldn't give you a chance to say anything. And no matter where you were going, when, Walt was constantly talking. So I remember, and Rudy will back this up on some of our trips down to New York. It's a long, long trip. And usually they're at night, and if you know the Merritt Parkway, Walt would start talking. And Walt would actually, and I think they show a picture of Walt driving. Well, that's not really Walt. He would turn around and you get real quiet. So actually, we used to play like we were asleep. Maybe that would shut us up. So I guess to Walt, there's only Walt didn't really need an introduction. He just needed a way of getting a conclusion. Walt was a talker. Walt, I think you can see on the cover, also had a big B on his cap, and I guess everyone just assumed that meant Bates, but it really didn't. It really meant he was the boss. And Walt would, he's one of the guys. He would always say, look, I'm just like the rest of you. I'm just, another number. But to Walt, the difference was that he was number one. And, being number one, Walt would try to, first of all, he'd try to encourage you, then he'd, try to compete with you and push you. He'd get you to do something. And he was your ultimate motivator. Walt was the greatest motivator I've ever seen. And in fact, we're starting a program out in the West Coast, a motivational program. We call it Personal Achievement Network. Well, in a sense, we should have named it Walt. It's the world's achiever, leader, and teacher. And I'll tell you, Walt, you'll always be number one in my book. And thanks for the memories. And I really love you, Walt, and no, you can't have my bud.
John is all too modest. What he did not mention is that this year he has made a generous personal contribution to Bates College to establish a scholarship for the next 3 years for an incoming Bates student to receive, I believe, $5,000 per year. To be given in the name of Walt Slovenski to an incoming Bates student who shows success and achievement in academics and in his community, and it probably wouldn't hurt if he could run a quarter in 48.5.
Excuse me. Actually, I got a bill from Walt for $15,000 for travel and entertainment.
I'm sure you guys will work this out. One of the most inspiring performances that I saw when I was an athlete at Bates College was to watch John Emerson run the 1 mile in 4 minutes and 10 seconds, and I saw the incredible effort and training that it took to get John around the track at that distance at that time. And I said, there's a record that is going to stand for a long, long time, and maybe it'll never be broken by a Bates College athlete. Our next guest, however, shattered that record, ran 4 minutes, 8 seconds flat. Would you welcome, please, Paul Hammond from the class of 1982.
Thank you very much, Coach. Coach, I feel tonight like I did before a lot of races. I feel pretty ill-prepared and kind of nervous, and I really have to go to the bathroom. I'm going to try and make this fast as I can. Let's see, when I first got to Bates as a freshman, I was very nervous. I was very thin. I weighed about 125, and I had long hair. Thanks for not kicking me off the team for that. Believe it or not, I did back then. I had a lot of long hair. And I remember the first time I went into the locker room, and I was very nervous, and I was taking off all my clothes, and this big guy comes in with red hair, and he's about 6'3", and he's got a jock strap on. He comes over to me, and he smiles at me, and evil, like, smile. And Sparky grabs me by the breast and tries to pick me up. And he says, I really want to party with you. I was very scared at that moment. I don't know if I'm going to do well here, so I figured tonight I don't know, I'll go to my brother's room, and, well, he lived with George Rose and Mark Dorian, who were two of the more crazy competitive runners that you coached there. Probably Mark, you'd run the lake with him 15 miles, and then he'd go on and run it again. So I went to your house, Coach, and you took me in, and you said, oh, do you want some ice cream? I said, sure, Coach. You picked me some ice cream, and you sat me, and you were watching me eat it, and you were smiling, and I thought, this is the worst ice cream I've ever tasted. It just tastes like cardboard. It's disgusting. But you were so happy to see me eat it. I ate it all. I said, do you want more, Paul? I thought, no. And, well, that ice cream, I guess, had been in there for my three years past. You scraped off the ice crystals to get at it and finished it off for you. And, but Coach, you always made things exciting at Bates. You're driving, we've all got stories of that. Actually, I always wondered what you did, for that spell in the morning there where you'd come in, you'd write out the workouts, and I wonder what he does. Now I know what you did. You used to run home and watch those reruns of Starsky and Hutch, right? I mean, Coach, when he got excited driving, you'd talk about back when I was in school, a fellow every now and then, Coach would be going on the Gay Straight Alliance, and he'd start going 65, and he'd start talking about Tank McNamara, and he'd be going 70, and then Gloria Crosby would come in, and he'd be going 85 down the pike, but it was something to behold with driving, Coach. But Coach, you always, changed the times. First it was beat the Russians, then beat those Unifieds, and you always seem to have your family in the band. That's what I really, from what I got from you, Coach, was family values. I always wondered how you got away with it. You'd have like little seats you put up for them, and I wondered about the seatbelt laws, but I thought they had to have seats anyway. It was a lot of fun, and I must say, through all our years, we all meet different characters at Bates, different runners, and one constant has always been Coach. And he taught us all the value of hard work, and the value of, he was a competitive fellow, and he taught us the value of that. And I think through Bates we got friends for a lifetime, and I just was thankful to be part of that, Coach.